What's up guys, it's Tony from Streetball Strategies, where we use strategy to build your streetball legacy. Today we're talking about displaying confidence when you may not feel like you actually have confidence. Today we're talking about faking it till you make it. This video is for those of you who want to be out here on the court, you want to be a part of the action, you want to fit in, but when you come out here and you see the players that are out here, you see that they're more experienced than you and they have more abilities than you and more skills than you, you may become intimidated. You may become nervous about being out here. You're new, you don't have as much experience as everybody else does, and you become intimidated and nervous. And those are perfectly fine, natural feelings to have as long as you continue to come out here and you continue to compete with them. The problem comes when you start avoiding coming out here because you feel nervous, you feel intimidated, you feel like you don't belong, you feel like you can't belong. You're basically intimidated and you feel inferior and you feel like you don't belong. So you start avoiding coming out here and competing against people. You may come out here by yourself and practice and drill and all of that, but you start avoiding the competition of dealing and competing against people who are clearly more experienced and more skilled than you are. So what do we do about your lack of confidence out here? What do we do to keep you coming out here and to keep you competing and to keep you having competitive court time? Well, you're going to do what generations of players have done before you, and that is to behave as if you're confident even though you don't feel like you are. To behave as if you feel like you belong out here even though you don't necessarily feel that way. The goal being that in the process of doing that, you develop your skill, you develop abilities, you naturally develop experience of being out here, and as you do that, you will gain actual experience, you will gain actual skill, you will gain actual abilities through that process. And even though you're only behaving as if you belong, as if you have confidence, through that process you will actually build and gain confidence and abilities and skills. Now let me explain what more experienced streetball players expect from you when you come out here. Because you're new, because we understand that you're inexperienced and you're still trying to learn, the reality is we don't expect much. We don't expect much from you out here. We don't expect you to be some kind of streetball all-star as soon as you hit the court. What we expect most from you is for you to be engaged, for us to experience your engagement while you're out here. So let's talk about verbal engagement, what we expect to hear from you verbally when you're out here. Just a quick note to those players who are natural verbal people and thus natural verbal players. If it is in your nature to talk a lot, to be verbal, to maybe even be a trash talker, especially to the trash talkers, when you do that out here as an inexperienced, younger, newer player, if you're going to be talking trash, the reality is you're going to be kind of adding another layer of difficulty onto your progress out here, because you're going to be talking trash that you can't really back up yet. And thus, when you do that, you're kind of setting yourself up for frustration and maybe some humiliation, because you're going to be talking trash, which, okay, comes natural to you, but understand that if you're going to do that, it's going to be a little bit harder on you because you're going to be talking trash about things that you can't really back up yet at this point. But overall, when it comes to you as a new player, portraying confidence out here verbally, it really means that you don't do much, you don't say much. You shouldn't be saying much anyway. You're new, you're young, you're inexperienced, you're trying to learn so that you can become better. And thus, you can't learn if you're talking, so verbally we don't expect much from you. A lot of players often make the mistake that when you're out here, you should not be asking questions of the more experienced players because it makes you look weak. It sort of exposes you as not knowing what you're doing. And so a lot of players will avoid asking questions because they don't want to look weak to the more experienced players. I understand the sentiment of that, but you have to understand it's much better for you to ask questions and try to understand what's going on out here, as opposed to acting like you know what's going on when you really don't, and then making crucial mistakes that are going to cost your team on the court. So don't pretend like you know what's going on if you really don't. While you're on the court in the midst of a game, if something is happening that you don't understand, or if a play is being planned to run that you don't understand, please ask for clarification. But don't expect that you're going to get a full-blown explanation in the middle of a game. If something's happening that you don't understand, tell the players on your team, I don't understand what that means. And then they will then give you direction, and it's on you to follow that direction in the moment to the best of your ability. And again, we understand that you're young and inexperienced and that you're learning on the fly, so we don't expect you to be perfect out here. What we expect is for you to take the direction as best as you can and then do the best you can in the moment. In between games is when you can ask full-blown questions and try to get full-blown explanations. But in the middle of a game, ask for clarification, state that you don't understand what's going on or what's expected of you, take the direction and do the best you can with it. But don't avoid asking questions because you're afraid of making yourself look weak or inconfident. One of the best ways you can show confidence is that you're confident enough to ask questions because you're trying to learn and get better and help the more experienced players out here. We see that, we understand that, but if you just sort of pretend like you know what's going on when you really don't, we will take that as a sign of weakness from you. The only other thing we expect from you verbally is when you make a mistake, because as a new player, you're going to make more mistakes than other players, and we understand that. What we expect from you when you make a mistake is for you to acknowledge the mistake and take responsibility for it. So what you say when you make a mistake is some version of, that was my fault, it's on me, that was my mistake, and I'm going to try to not let it happen again. That's all you say. That's all we expect you to say. But what you absolutely do not do is to blame or lash out at other people on the court. Because as someone who's new out here, as someone who is so engaged and trying so hard to play perfectly and not let down your teammates and not make mistakes, when you do make mistakes, it's just human nature to then have an embarrassment about making that mistake. And then when you're embarrassed, you feel frustrated, you feel angry, and when that happens, some players can have the natural tendency to lash out at other players on the court. And that is the exact wrong thing to do. You don't want to lash out at your opponents, and you certainly don't want to lash out at your teammates. When you make a mistake, we want you to internalize it. We want you to take responsibility for it, to acknowledge it, and to then do your best to not let it happen again. And as a lower player on the totem pole out here, you're going to have to take responsibility for mistakes that may not even be your fault or all of your fault. You're going to have to take responsibility for mistakes when it's unfair to you to have to take responsibility. That's just sort of the nature of the beast. You're going to have to take responsibility for things that aren't your fault. You're going to have to take responsibility for things when it's not fair for you to take responsibility. You're just going to have to take it and internalize it. The worst thing you can do is to blame other people or to start making excuses. When you're trying to explain what happened, when you're trying to rationalize what happened, all we really hear is excuse and time being wasted. We're not interested in the reason or the excuse or the rationale for the mistake. All we care about is that you take responsibility, that you're aware that you made a mistake, and that you try to not let it happen again. Anything other than that is a mistake in itself. So internalize the mistake, don't blame other people, and don't explain or make excuses for why the mistake happened. If you're asked for an explanation, then of course give one, but don't try to explain away why you made the mistake. Really, other than that, verbally, nothing else is expected of you out here. And you shouldn't expect that of yourself either. If you're new, if you're just starting to learn, if you're at the very beginning, you really don't have much to say. You're just out here to learn as fast as you can and get better as fast as you can, and you can't do that while you're talking. Just listen and learn. And honestly, it's perfectly fine that it's not expected of you to be saying much while you're out here, because the vast majority of the way you display confidence in the world, and especially on the court, is through body language. That is the vast majority of the way we perceive people and their confidence is through their body language. Think about it. When you see someone out here that you don't know, who's a stranger to you, and you see them on the court for the very first time and they're shooting around, what do? You pay attention to them, you study them, but even if it's only subconscious, somewhere in your mind you start to try to fill in the blanks of how they play, what kind of player are they. What you're essentially doing is you're making assumptions about that player, and you're profiling them. You're profiling them to be the kind of player you think they are, even though you don't know them, even though you've never seen them before, even though you don't know their game. You're taking little visual cues from them, and in your mind you're building a profile about the kind of player you think they are. That's the way it works on the court, that's the way it works in the real world, and that's the way it should work. You should make assumptions about people. You should profile people. And you do it anyway without knowing it, without realizing it, without planning it. You do it subconsciously every day of your life that you're around new people. You make assumptions about them, you profile them. And you should do that, and you definitely should do that on the court, because you're trying to give yourself a competitive advantage. And that's what we do to you when you show up on the court. And again, it's all about engagement and how you engage with us. And when we're talking about body language and your engagement in terms of body language, we are looking for the classic things such as when you're trying to display confident body language, you have, your chin up, you're looking people in the eye, you have your shoulders back, chest out, that kind of stuff, all that classic kind of stuff that we recognize that. But when we're talking about engagement, we are talking about you not isolating yourself from the rest of the court. One of the big reasons for feeling intimidated or feeling nervous is because you come out here, maybe you're by yourself and there's a group of people and they're obviously friends and they obviously know each other, and when it's just you by yourself coming out to the court and you're trying to fit in with a group of people who are already friends and already know each other, that can be intimidating. It can make you nervous. What you don't want to do in that situation is to sort of subconsciously or even intentionally kind of separate yourself from that group. You don't want to have the kind of body language where you're giving off the impression that you're intimidated or that you're nervous or that you feel isolated from them. You don't want it to be a situation where the group of people is here and you're standing off to the side here and you're kind of, you have your head down, your shoulders slumped, hands in your pockets or crossed or something. And when you stand like this and you're apart from them, you're giving off the body language that you are intimidated and that you do feel separated from them. What you want to do is just sort of appear confident. You want to appear like you belong with them, like you don't feel separate from them. You want to be engaged with them. You want to speak to them and look them in their eye. And, you know, say for example, you're on the side of the court and they're waiting to play next, and now you're part of that group that's waiting to play next. While you're doing that, if they're talking to each other, if they're engaging with each other, engage with them, stand with them, don't stand apart from them. Don't be weird and get all awkwardly close to them, but don't subconsciously or especially intentionally separate yourself from them. Pretend like you feel like you're part of their group. Pretend like you feel like you belong. Essentially, you know, you're waiting to get next, they're waiting to get next. Don't be afraid to try to be part of that group. Don't separate yourself from that group. Give off the body language that you have the confidence to be part of that group. And the same sort of principles apply for when you're on the court and you're actually playing. What you don't want to do is sort of stand off to the side in the corner and have the mentality that you're going to kind of stay out of the way of the more experienced, skilled players that are already out here, because you don't want to get in their way. You don't want to stand off to the side. You don't want to separate yourself. You want to stay engaged. Remember, we're looking for engagement. We don't expect you to be an all-star player out here. We understand that you're new and you're still trying to learn, but you can't learn if you're not engaging. You can't learn if you're being shy, if you're standing off to the side, if you're just going to go hide in the corner. You can't learn that way. You can't engage that way. And the best way to show confidence as a new lower tier player out here who's still trying to learn is through effort. It's through hard work. It's through you doing things that more experienced players may not want to do. It's like running down loose balls, you know, diving out of bounds to keep a ball in bounds, fighting for rebounds. It's all about giving effort. It's all about trying hard and displaying that to your teammates, being engaged in the game, showing them that you're trying to help, you're trying to win. That's how you display confidence on the court. Now you may be saying that that's going to feel really weird. It's going to feel really awkward to be out here, to be behaving as if you're confident when you're not, to be behaving as if you feel like you belong when you really don't. Isn't that going to be weird? Isn't it going to feel awkward? Oh yeah, it's definitely going to feel terrible. It's going to feel terrifying. It's not going to be easy to do, but think of it this way. Think of it that the first time you do it, it's going to be terrible. It's going to feel like you're going crazy with nerves. But after that, it's only going to get better. It's never going to get worse than the very first time you go about trying to do it. And understand that the first few times you do it, it's going to feel weird, and you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to have to adjust to it, but naturally that's what you're going to do. You're going to adjust to it because you're going to be gaining experience. You're going to be practicing skills and practicing abilities and getting in that competition and experiencing that. And regardless of if it feels awkward, if it feels weird, if it makes your skin crawl the first time you do it, the important thing is that you experience it and you continue to do it. You repeatedly do it. You do it over and over again until you actually develop skill and ability. And through doing that, at the same time as faking it, you're actually creating the thing that you're faking. And one day you're just going to notice that you come out here, you're going to pretend like you belong, like you have skill, like you have experience, and you're going to find that you don't really need to pretend anymore because you actually do have experience. You actually do now have skills and abilities that you built up through time, through your repetition, through being out here when it felt awkward, when you felt inferior. You've built experience, you've built knowledge, you've built abilities, and now you don't have to fake it anymore because you just have a base now of skill and ability and experience that you can now draw from, whereas at the beginning you don't have that foundation, you don't have that experience. You have to get it somehow, you have to experience it somehow, and if you have to fake it till you make it, then that's what you got to do. You do whatever you have to do to stay out here on the court and have court time and to be competitive. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you appreciate the idea of faking it till you make it. It's not an ideal approach, but it is you doing whatever you have to do to stay out here and be competitive and to learn. Please give me a thumbs up if you guys like this video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you hit that notification bell to be notified of all my future videos, and I will see you guys next week.
But hey, you know the saying, fake it till you make it. Me, I did the opposite, made it then I faked it.